So the Blizzcon sessions on WoW Classic have finally come and gone, and we're finally able to answer the question, at least for now, what does the future have in store for World of Warcraft Classic? Of course we got Cataclysm and Solo Self-Found for hardcore, but the thing we were all waiting for was the word on Classic Plus. And we sort of got it with the announcement of Season of Discovery. Now, Classic Plus is not one well-defined thing. Everyone has their own opinion on what exactly it is, but shared among most of them is new content, new raids, dungeons and zones, and new iterations on classes, all set in the familiar world of vanilla Azeroth. So maybe to some people, this is exactly what they were looking for in Classic Plus. And to Blizzard, this certainly seems like a soft commit, or at least a way to test the waters on what might eventually become a full-fledged, late-game Classic Plus version of the game. No matter what you call it, what it does show on Blizzard's part is a willingness to experiment and iterate on Classic, which bodes well for those of us that do want a new version of the original game. But before we get into what this means, let's get into everything we know about Season of Discovery. First off, it will be set in the original version of the game, with no initial changes to quests or zones, at least at the beginning. The one exception will be changes to some dungeons, the first of them being Black Fathom Deeps, which is being turned into a fully featured 10-man raid, complete with new gear, new boss mechanics, and new quests. To facilitate an endgame with BFD as the primary raid, the level cap will be set to 25 to start, and Blizzard has committed to several level up raids that will take us through the level 60 cap. The other big thing they're bringing out is a feature called Rune Engraving, new abilities each class can obtain by applying them like a gem slot to their items. Most of these abilities will be familiar from other expansion packs, some entirely new, and ultimately they're going to make it so classic classes can be played with new flair, and even suit new roles, like tank shamans and paladins, healing mages, and so on. Paladins get Hand of Reckoning and Crusader Strike, mages get a heal, shamans get dual wield, warlocks get metamorphosis, you get the idea. And the real spirit behind the name Season of Discovery comes from how you'll find the engraving runes. There will be new mobs, new treasures, and new group events that unlock these throughout the world, and none of this is going up on beta beforehand, so it should all be super fresh for everyone when it releases. On top of the raid, there will be AV-esque PvP events in Ashenvale, which earn you level 25 gear and a mount usable at 25, but only in Ashenvale. Not a ton of detail there yet. And finally, the respec costs will be kept low, and from the sound of it, dual spec isn't completely off the table either. And all of this is releasing on November 30th. Now the interesting thing about all of this is that they said they're open to expanding on this idea at max level if it gets any traction, which is where Season of Discovery starts to look a little more officially like a Classic Plus. At the end of the presentation, they had a little teaser with pictures of Nomergon, Scarlet Monastery, and Karazhan Crypts, which would definitely be a level 60 endeavor. And without getting into every detail about the runes and the new abilities coming to the classes, which I'm sure I'll cover later, that's about everything we know right now. So of course we're left with a bunch of open questions. What's happening with professions? What about scaling outside of the BFD raid for dungeons and world content? The new abilities are obviously going to spike our power. Is anything going to be adjusted around that? What about for the second phase and the new level bracket releases? Will the leveling zones be scaled up to suit our new gear and power levels? And what dungeons are we even going to have access to? Wailing Caverns, Dead Mines, Shadowfang Keep? Is there even going to be a reason to run those with the new gear? How is this going to impact items and itemization more broadly? Are we going to have new tank-focused cloth items for warlocks, for example? Are some of our favorite 20s items going to get outpaced by the new additions? What's the PvP ranking system going to look like? There's certainly a lot to consider, and I'm sure we'll get more information soon. Or maybe not. The release is only about 3 weeks away, so perhaps we'll be going in blind. We'll just have to see. So what about the reception of Season of Discovery? How are people feeling about the new announcement? Well, I'm largely seeing a positive reception out there. There are a few classic purists who are upset about it, but I have to wonder if there's any news that could come out about Classic that would make them happy. Ultimately, this didn't close the door on Classic Plus, which is what many people expected to come out of this year's BlizzCon. I myself am cautiously optimistic about it. Flipping progression on its head to have endgame taking place at the lower level brackets might just be crazy enough to work, and it definitely sounds fun enough to try out. We're getting new viability for specs, albeit in a different way than I expected. I personally would have been okay with Elemental or Ret being viable if they didn't have to go and make Warlock tanks and Mage healers, but I guess we'll have to see how that goes. At least we're getting something familiar, but slightly different to try out in the vanilla world. I'm also glad to see this being released as a slow trickle. I never liked the idea of going all the way to 60 and only then starting the plus journey. Starting low lets us draw out the journey a bit longer, and also gives Blizzard time to incorporate feedback and tune as we progress through the levels. I'm expecting to see PvP be a really interesting phenomenon. As they said, a big inspiration for this season was the level 30 cap play that took place during Classic Beta. So I'm sure there's going to be plenty more streamer tournaments and PvP events like that. But overall, Blizzard seems to be committed to maintaining the spirit of Classic, and while I'm sure this departure completely blows that possibility right off the bat for some people, I think it's worth a chance, and I'm glad to see them taking this risk. But there are a few things that I can already see being issues in this version, so I'm interested to see how they'll be addressed. For example, Ashenvale is going to become a completely grief-ridden nightmare with the level cap at 25, and the PvP and raids situated there. I'm assuming the same will go for zones like Hillsbrad and Stone Talon. Will there be PvP servers? And what will trying to get from, say, level 20 to 25 look like if you're a couple weeks behind the curve and everyone's already swarming those zones? How will obtaining the runes work exactly? Are we going to have set spawn locations for them? If so, are there going to be any safeguards against the inevitable gatekeeping, spawn camping, and griefing that we'll see trying to obtain them? I can already see a raid team of stacked level 25s making sure nobody is able to pick up some of the most sought after runes. That type of thing might be great for drama content, but it's terrible for the game. And what does this all mean for the lore? Blizzard's presenter said that there won't be any changes to the story on BFD, but we're already seeing a Void Akumai, which does have story implications, and the same goes for abilities with the classes. They say they want to maintain the class fantasy, and it's easy enough to give a mage an arcane heal and call it a day, but is making a mage a healer really sticking to the fantasy and the established lore? That isn't really what they are in Classic, or in any expansion for that matter. But probably my biggest concern is with the rune engraving system itself. This announcement overall is pretty close to what I would have hoped to see for Classic Plus, but personally I was hoping for softer changes to the classes, and I'm concerned that at this rate we're going to be stuck into a Classic Plus that rolls into new content at level 60 and carries these new class role combos into it. Like I said earlier, I would have been just fine with minor updates to the classes just to make the lesser played specs a little more viable, but I guess you can't have it all. So what does this all mean for the future of WoW Classic? Well, if this isn't straight up Classic Plus, it's definitely a big step in that direction. They seem to be approaching this carefully, and while I don't personally agree with every design decision, I'm happy to see them taking the risk. I just hope that this doesn't turn into a perpetual carrot dangled in front of the Classic audience, with quick seasonal restart servers over and over and over again that gradually pervert the Classic world into something that nobody really recognizes anymore. Eventually, they're going to have to make a hard commit to something, or they're going to burn out the audience. But as Metzen said, Blizzard is putting all of their marbles on the retail World Soul saga. So, is a committed and continued revamp of Classic something we should really hope for? Only time will tell, but in any event, there we have it. Season of Discovery, out in just a couple of weeks. It'll definitely keep me busy for the time being, but I'll be looking to the future to see how all of the dust settles around Classic Plus. What do you guys think? Does this whet your appetite for Classic Plus? Were you hoping to see something more, or something entirely different? Let me know in the comments. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you all back in Azeroth later this month.